Reaching 1 million in revenue feels like you've made it, but here's the trap. The legal system that worked at 250K or 500K won't protect you at 1 million. In fact, that's the stage where contracts break, staff disputes erupt, and regulators start paying closer attention. I've seen clinics celebrate hitting 7 figures only to crash months later because they missed one critical update. In this episode, I'll show you what that mistake is and how to avoid it. So first off, congratulations on hitting $1 million. That's a big deal. But what got you to here isn't going to get you to the next phase of your revenue. And if you haven't worked with an attorney yet, I think there's a lot of legal blindsides at the 1 million mark. And here's why. You get a little confident, right? You made it. 1 mil, it's a big deal. 7 figures. Everyone, I think, would love that revenue mark. But now's the time, and there's really no excuse to turn around and look back at some of those old systems because that's not going to scale with you. One of those is going to be contracts, right? Your initial contracts between you as owners or as an owner to get cleaned up as you keep going. Another one is all the policies and procedures. There's really no excuse at the 7-figure mark to not go back and clean all of that up and get this system moving. At the 1 million mark, a few things start happening. One, presumably you have a pretty significant amount of staff, whether that's contractors or employees. We need to figure out exactly the classification of the staff as well as how many there's going to be in each category. At the 1 million mark, also another thing happens. Regulators keep more of an eye on you. When you're a bigger player in the game, there's more risk of actually getting an audit and having individuals look at all of those contracts and your setup. And so first off, celebrate that win. That's a really big deal. But if you're going to get to 5 million, 10 million, 100 million, what have you, now is the time to actually do what you should have done from the start. You certainly have the financial ability to do so, and I think it's a really good investment long term. So now's the time to really audit your foundation at the 1 million mark. And once you see the cracks, the next step is understanding where the risks really live. So here's one we get a lot. In fact, last week somebody called us where it's 2 partners, right? They have a very valuable business, and finally we're having the conversation about what are we going to do with our lives? We got $1 million plus in revenue. Our company's probably worth multiple million, but life circumstances have changed. Where we were in our roles at the very beginning of the company, now we have some different feelings about where we want to go. One of the partners actually wanted to, kind of exit and get more involved with their family and not do 50 to 60 hour weeks that got them there. The other partner wanted to just keep going, keep grinding, keep making money, wanted to get, to the next mill effectively. And unfortunately at this point, we didn't have anything in writing. We had kind of a hodgepodge legal agreement that got us all the way up to 7 mil. So for these clients, it was very important to have the tough conversations that weren't had at the beginning about how can we buy out or exit the company? Can we even exit the company? And what do those buyout provisions look like? So that if we get to 2 to 5 to 10, we don't need to say, well, I thought actually I could just kind of get out of here. Or, life happens, right? You meet someone, you have another kid, you have pets, you move across the country, you decide you don't enjoy the business anymore, and that's okay. It's very important to have this type of an ownership agreement. And there's really, at the 1 million mark, when you have a lot on the line, not that your original business wasn't very valuable, but now you have financial value tied to it. And so now's the time to either create or revisit those agreements, because sometimes at the beginning, you can also use a lot of, template language about buy sell. Now's the time to actually talk about what it looks like if you want to exit. And it's not just ownership agreements or buy sell agreements. It's also staff contracts. So staff get very sophisticated in value at the $1 million mark. They're starting to think about, am I going to stay with this company as it grows? Or am I going to also, other stuff is happening in my life. You may have some competition. You may have people trying to poach your staff as well. And so now's the time to look at non-solicitation, non-competes if they exist in your state, and some other compensation structures that are going to keep people around. Those, among others, is just straight up compliance. At the $1 million mark, again, you have a very valuable business. It's time to go back and make sure that things like the corporate practice of medicine aren't just a random term that you heard online, that those are actually cleaned up and you have the right ownership structure if you're going to grow and potentially exit. And by exit, I mean probably sell the business. So at that $1 million mark, your compliance needs to evolve with now the patient volume, the staff size, and where you're at from a revenue mark. So once you know the risks, the final step is simply reinforcing your business so it scales safely. All right, so I've done a lot of ranting, I'll admit that. But at the $1 million mark, I care more because a lot more is on the line. And so now's the time not only to look at the entity, the contracts, and the compliance, but another thing that I talked about in a previous podcast was the MSO, or Management Services Organization structure. At the $500,000 mark, what you'll see is generally you reach the capacity of what 1 or 2 healthcare practitioners can do in terms of what they can bill in terms of revenue. So we're at a very critical point in a business where delegation needs to occur, and it's a very good time to start outsourcing some of the non-clinical work to those who are very good at it. And that's what the MSO is for. And I go over a lot in a previous episode about why and how you do that. But at the $1 million mark, you should at least ask the question, is an MSO a good choice? And decide yes, no, or maybe later. Because ultimately, if you're trying to go from 1 mil to more, you're going to have to delegate if you're a 1 or 2 member shop. And the MSO structure is going to enable that much more quickly. So that alongside also checking what your structure is, LLC, Corp, S Corp, what have you, now's the time where taxes really come into play, as well as when we're thinking about exiting. This is the opportunity to consider some restructuring or at least moving as we're looking at MSO, another location, or just finally cleaning up a incorrect entity. So the difference between clinics that stall at 1 million and those that scale further is simple. They reinforce their foundation before the cracks appear. Now you know the $1 million mistake to avoid. In the next episode, we'll go even deeper and talk about how our law firm uses AI prompts every day, prompts you can steal for your clinic.